It's Thursday, April 11, 2013. I'm Michael Young, welcoming you to another edition of Under the Microscope right here on television, Guyana. With me today as guest is the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, Mr. Anil Nandlal, and we're going to be discussing the 2013 National Budget, some of the developments that occurred within the National Assembly, and of course we're going to look pointedly to the future with respect to some of the things that Guyanese can expect next week, Monday, when the budget consideration of the estimates gets underway. Minister, welcome to the Under the Microscope.
Thank you very much and good evening, viewers.
I know that we have much to discuss with respect to the budget. Generally, your thoughts with respect to the debates that would have ensued and came to an end on Tuesday over the last week or so.
Well, the debates, I think, speaking from the perspective of the government and foreign on behalf of the government side, I think that the presentations which emanated from the side of the government were of a commendably high quality. They collectively and individually outlined the various allocations which were made to the various sectors of the country, demonstrating very clearly that each of the major segment of our population benefited in a significant way from budgetary allocations made, be them our farmers, our public sector workers, private sector workers, private sector employees, our business, both small and large, our pensioners, our self-employed, our Amerindian people, our Region 10 people, our coastal residents, our children, our students, our professionals. Every major segment of our population was addressed in a material and in a significant way, their social well-being, their economic well-being in that budget. And that, I believe, was highlighted. Also, what was highlighted was that the major capital infrastructural projects that are intended to address all Guyanese and to benefit all Guyanese. I speak, of course, of the Amaila Falls project. I speak, of course, of the Cherry Jagan International Airport expansion project. I speak about the specialty hospitals. I speak about the several roads and highways, bridges, the new Demerara Harbour Bridge, which is under feasibility study, the new highway from Providence to Diamond, and from Soesdijk to Timeri Airport. I speak of the new highway from Hydroni to Parika. I speak of the highway along the East Bank, Berbice, and of course all the other projects that you would have been hearing about over the last few years. And we were able, I believe, to establish that the opposition, though the world knows and every single Guyanese know that substantial progress has been made in this country, you don't have to, because you're in the opposition, deny the existence of growth rates which have taken place in this country for the last 7 years consecutively, when the Caribbean and the world has been in recession. You don't have to deny the existence of the transformational changes which are taking place right across the length and breadth of our country, touching the lives of each segment of our population. You cannot, it's incredible for you to deny the reality that you see. But we have an opposition that denies the existence of all these things and chooses a few things and blow them up. For example, inadequate health facilities somewhere in the interior or even in Georgetown. Now, we are not saying that all is perfect. Hence, every single year, we present a bigger budget. As the economy grows, it allows us to spend more. Every year, we increase salaries. Every year, we increase production. Every year, we reduce taxes. Now these things all cannot happen all the at the same time. What in 2002, for example, we could not have done some of the things that we are doing now. And development is a progressive process. It is not something that is instantaneous. It takes time, and it depends upon the availability of resources, and those resources are available based upon a number of realities, some of which are within our control and some that are outside of our sphere of influence. So there is a concatenation and accumulation of a number of factors which results in development at a national level. So yes, we are going to have problems. A budget of any singular year was never designed, was never conceived, and cannot, in fact, be regarded as a panacea of all the social and economic ills facing a country, a society, or a people. It is not intended to do that.
But would you say that some of the comments that were made by some opposition personalities were justified? I heard comments that spoke about the state of our education sector, comments that pointed to specific instances in Region 5 where farmers and some of the things that they advocated for were not contained in the budget, where there was blatant mismanagement, according to the opposition, of public resources. Are all of these things, unworthy of being, worked on, listened to, and responded to, if I wanted to use the layman's terms?
No, they are not unfounded. Take education, for example. It is because we recognize inadequacies in the education sector that we have decided to put the largest singular budgetary allocation to that sector. It is because we recognize that there are management issues and inadequacies at public sector institutions that we continue to invest in modern systems. We continue to invest in things that are going to bring about changes. The point I am making is that we are not oblivious to the inadequacies. We may differ slightly, as we are entitled to do, in terms of how we see a particular situation and how we see a solution to the situation. The opposition may believe that it can be addressed one way, and we may believe that it can be addressed another way. There is nothing wrong with that. What is important is that we both recognize the inadequacies, the inefficiencies, and the mischief which has to be remedied. Okay. Take, for example, let me briefly deal with this point because it's extremely significant. You know, the opposition has been saying to us that we have not consulted with them. And of course, the Minister of Finance, who heads the government team in pursuit of this initiative, has reported repeatedly of his efforts to engage the opposition and the extent to which his efforts were successful. He emphasized the fact that Mr. Carl Greenidge, who is the opposition's point person on budget matters, absented himself from the country at the most critical point in that process. And the minister has emails exchanged between himself and Mr. Carl Greenidge at that critical time, with him, the minister, calling on Carl Greenidge to come forward and let us talk. And Greenidge is saying, okay, I'll be there, etc., etc. So there are documentary evidence which we can produce to establish that Mr. Greenidge was unavailable. But what is significant is that consultations must not be confined to the opposition. There were consultations by the government with various stakeholders in the country. the business sector, the farming interests, the trade union movements, the religious organizations, and the Amerindian organizations, and various representative groupings. But what is of fundamental importance, and the Minister of Finance, with commendable clarity and in great details, pointed out, having gone through the 3 manifestos, the PPP manifesto at the 2011 elections, the AFC manifesto, and the APNU manifesto. And he extracted from each of those manifestos, in particular those from the opposition parties, the various initiatives, programs, and policies which are in the budget, implemented. Because what did we do? Of course, we must give priority to our manifesto. And then we try to implement those promises. Secondly, we go through a process of juxtaposing and comparing our manifesto with the others. And once there are common grounds, common principles, common initiatives, common policies, common areas of priorities and concerns, we extract them. That is why Mr. Ramjatan, for example, was forced to admit that since 2012 budget, though they cut it, it had in it many of the initiatives which are in their manifesto. And Dr. Ashni Singh was able yesterday to emphatically point out several of the initiatives which are in the APNU's manifesto, which he pointed out were in this budget, and they were criticized. Those very initiatives were criticized by the opposition in their speeches. In other words, it was clear that many of the postures which they took them for political purposes. They took them because they feel compelled that because they are in the opposition, they must oppose. And therefore, what they promised the Guyanese people was not important. What is significant for the advancement of the welfare of the Guyanese people was not important. What was important for the development of Guyana as a country was not important. What was of paramount importance to them were taking positions that would serve their political interest and would advance their political agenda. And that I found to be unfortunate in the budget debate.
Notwithstanding all that you've said, I think the opposition's core concern was that the consultations were not meaningful from the beginning, for the simple fact of how the People's Progressive Party Civic had approached those consultations in their own words. And secondly, the opposition leader David Granger in the National Assembly recently called the budget a blank. He said it was a cardboard budget, a budget that did not address the needs of the poor people of this country. He said it was a budget that did not meet the concerns of the people frontally, and he said that he could not support that budget without inflicting changes and cuts. We're going to discuss the aspect
because
of
I can answer each.
But I want you
specifically,
Minister, to respond pointedly to the concept of meaningful consultations when they happen within the context of the PPP, the AFC, and the APNU sitting together and probably discussing the different views, as you would have said, and you pointed out what was the hindrance to such a consultation bearing fruit in the end, the non-availability of Mr. Carl Greenwich. But subsequent to that, the opposition is saying even after, let's say, the process fell down, the budget came. And within this budget, this $208.8 billion budget, he does not see programs and initiatives that meet the poor people of this country, frontally and addresses their concerns. He said it's a cardboard.
If he cannot see the $200.8 billion in this budget.
208.8.
Yes, in this budget, benefiting the Guyanese people, then his problem is one of vision.
Okay.
And I can't correct that. That's a visionary impairment. Because there are so many initiatives that touches right across the length and breadth of this country. For example, the Amerindian Development Fund. $300 and something million, intended specific $600 and something million, intended specifically to build an economy, a village economy within each Amerindian village. Giving computers in the form of computer banks, and giving electricity for those banks to work in the interior must assist the poor people and must help the children who can't afford a computer. The One Laptop a Family program continues. That is intended to give every poor family a computer, to equip a poor child with an instrument that can allow him or her to access the world. That must be a empowering initiative. The small business sector, we have a rotating fund of $350 million so that the businessmen, small businessmen who cannot afford to put up collateral to access loans at the commercial bank, this money is there for the commercial bank to use as collateral to give loans. That will, of course, empower a whole section of people. We have the WOW program, specifically intended to benefit poor and single mothers. We have increase in old age pension. We have the subsidy to GPL for old age pensioners. We have the reduction in income tax. We have the incentive given to first homeowners for the first time, owning a house 40 million and below. Their interest can be deducted from their income. And those are just a few measures that are specifically designed to touch the poor man, the ordinary citizen. So he who says that he cannot see that this budget has anything for poor people is figuratively blind. More significantly, to the question of consultation, the greatest form of consultation is if I take your policies and I implement them. What are we going to sit down in a room to do? To satisfy each other's egos? To just show the world that there is a facade of consultation? Is it not more effective that I take your policy as expressed in your manifesto and I implement them? And that is what has happened here. Not to say that there was no consultation. To go back to my original argument, the President said at the beginning of the Parliament that we remain open to consultation. And Dr. Rashni Singh, in this budgetary process, indicated his availability for consultations, and there were a few engagements, and then one of the significant participator on behalf of the opposition absented himself from the country. His own party, the APNU, was critical of him, and he said so, and that they were spreading misinformation about him and his absenteeism and the fact that he was incommunicado during that critical period. He said so. So we must not fall prey to these arguments that there was no consultation. What they want, and it is expressed, and I spoke about it in my speech, what they want is that they want to present the budget. In fact, Carl Greenidge has a bill in the Parliament which seeks to give him, as chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, the power to present budget for a state agency, the Auditor General Office. And he has that very bill also seeks to take away from the executive that power to prepare and present the estimates and transfer it over from the executive, from the Minister of Finance, over to the Clerk of the National Assembly. And I challenge him to find another place on planet Earth where such a position obtains. And I said to him that that is not an ordinary constitutional violation. That these violations that he is committing are constitutional vulgarities of almost obscene proportions. So that is the crux of the matter, is that they actually want to present the budget.
But they're not the government, obviously.
Yeah, but they don't understand that. And you should tell them that.
And secondly, I think in the parliament during your own budget presentation, you made a very popular reference, though it made some members of the opposition uneasy, and they moved to criticize your use of language and the manner in which you drove home your point, using analogies to say to the opposition, you know, the impact of their actions and the cuts. For the purpose of all of our viewers who are looking at Under the Microscope this evening, Minister, share with us your position specifically with respect to the comments you made. You can regurgitate them here. I don't believe they're unworthy of being heard again. And secondly, you can explain the point you were seeking to make at that time.
Cutting of the national budget of any country cannot redound to the benefit of the people of that country. Opposition parliamentarians and parties all over the world normally, in the ordinary course of things, would agitate for increased expenditure. We have a political opposition in this country that does the opposite, that canvasses, agitates, and struggles to reduce government expenditure, to reduce monies that the government is prepared to make available for the benefit and welfare of the citizenry of a state. So it is clear that that is a position that cannot benefit the people. So why do they do it? I have said repeatedly that this is an opposition which is using a one-seat majority which they enjoy in the parliament to advance political agendas, to persecute and prosecute political spite, and they are using it as an instrument of vendetta against the government. It is my humble view that they seem to derive some form of self-induced pleasure when they are able to achieve this. Every time the parliament votes and they win, they come out of the parliament, their chest high, and they high-five themselves, and they say, we just beat them up, meaning they beat up the government. And they are all excited and energized, not considering for a moment, okay, we beat the government, but how did that benefit a citizen, a single citizen of this country? That is never in the equation of their consideration. When I look at how they have been speaking over the last few months of cutting the budget, even before it was presented. So if it is that this budget had $1 million US each for every single citizen in this country, they don't know that. But prior to even the presentation of the budget, they had expressed an intention to cut, clearly establishing and supporting the point I am making, that the cutting of the budget has nothing to do with the national interest and what is important for the people. It has to do with the satisfaction of some opposition's craving. And the reference I made was, and you hear them speak, about the size of the instrument, their individual instruments that they will use to carry out the exercise. Mr. Ramjatan, for example, says a bigger budget will require a bigger instrument from him. So I made using imagery. I said in the parliament that I looked at 3 of them on television, Mr. Nagamoto, Mr. Ramjatan, and Mr. Carl Greenidge, and they were so excited and they were so passionate when they were speaking about cutting the budget, that in my view, it looks as if cutting the budget is some form of political masturbation. And that in pursuit of that desire, it matters not that they are breaking up the country and messing up the people's lives. in pursuit of that political orgasm which they seem to be pursuing. So it's figurative and linguistic imagery employed to capture a particular situation.
It made lots of them uneasy.
Well, it was intended to, because I intend to unmask their agenda, because they are pretending and arguing that cutting the budget is good for the country, because cutting the budget cannot be a popular thing. When you cut that budget, you're not hurting me, you're not hurting Dr. Ashley Singh, you're not hurting the government, you are hurting the people who are to benefit from the monies that are to be spent in that budget. So it's an extremely difficult thing. But the pleasure which they seem to derive from the process of cutting overwhelms their obligation to serve the people's interest and to act in the people's best welfare.
Now, on another matter, and a very, very, very serious matter, as we
it is a serious matter that we're speaking about.
We are speaking about the budget in a serious manner, but I mean another aspect of our discussion, which is going to take, of course, more weight throughout our entire program. Come next week, because the opposition on Wednesday in the National Assembly were successful in terms of delaying the consideration of the 2013 estimates as contained in the budget, and that discussion will begin on Monday. And already we've gotten indications from opposition leader David Granger and the leader of the AFC, Kemrich Ranjatan, that they will cut the budget wherever the need is found or wherever they see the need, and they will drop all of those projects which they believe are not above board. Obviously, as Attorney General, you will have to be the chief legal advisor to the government on matters related to the budget throughout this period, while the finance minister will be the advisor with respect to the estimates and so. Can the opposition in 2013 inflict cuts to the budget, given the fact that in 2012 they were successful, you moved to the courts, you obtained several court orders and different issues during that year? Do you believe that that will be a bugbear to their attempts in 2013, which they've stated quite clearly that they are going to cut the budget whether or not the government likes it?
The Constitution speaks to many things. It allocates responsibilities to different arms of, or branches, if you may, of governmental power. The legislature, the judiciary, and the executive being the main and focal branches. Amongst the responsibilities allocated by the Constitution to the executive is the responsibility of financial management of the state. Amongst the responsibilities of financially managing the state is the responsibility of preparing and presenting the national estimates of Guyana. And the executive is required to present those estimates to the National Assembly for the approval of the National Assembly. Inherent in a power to approve is a power to withhold approval. There is no positive power of disapproval or reduction. The relevant constitutional provision has been examined by the court. And I will deal with the court's ruling in a few moments. But what I want to say is to draw an analogy to the president's power of assent to bills. The president has a power to assent to bills. The president doesn't have a power to reject bills. He has a power of assent and a power to withhold his assent. In other words, he has only a positive power to assent. He doesn't have a positive power to reject. He can assent or he can withhold his assent. Similarly, they can approve or they can withhold their approval. They have no power to cut or to reduce estimates. In the Chief Justice's ruling last year, the Chief Justice went through in 34 pages. He explained at length. Now I understand that a few members of the opposition are now saying that the Chief Justice did not say what I said. Yes. He said. But the Chief Justice ruled, I think, May last year, or June, I can't remember. I believe it was June. From June to now, you did not hear a single utterance from any opposition member that the Chief Justice said that they had a power to cut. None of them ever said that before. Now they are saying that the Chief Justice never said that. The Chief Justice's judgment is written in English language. I mean, comprehension is apparently a very difficult exercise. But with some patience and some with the use of a dictionary, one can read and understand. So I am not going to dispute the clear and express language of the Chief Justice's ruling. It was interpreted by the press and widely covered. Not a single attempt has been made in a year to challenge the Chief Justice's ruling in any form or fashion. One would admit that though there is the facility of a challenge, it was not exercised. And therefore one would reasonably presume that the Chief Justice's ruling is accepted. But apparently this year, a year after, like Rip Van Winkle, there is a great awakening from some slumber, and we are hearing now that the Chief Justice ruled differently. Well, I will distribute the judgment. It is online, and people who can read and who have the power of comprehension will form their own conclusions as to what the Chief Justice said. But what is important, and what I believe that the Chief Justice ruled, is that there is no express power to cut the budget as exists in other countries, for example, India. And the Chief Justice cited India because I give him the Indian Constitution, which expressly speaks to a power to reduce estimates. Our Constitution is silent on that. And the Chief Justice said that the power to reduce an estimate is a powerful facility. And if the framers of the Constitution wanted that to be implied or to be a power that the opposition should enjoy, the framers of the Constitution would have put it in express language. They did not do so. And he is unprepared to imply such a fundamental power in the Constitution. Secondly, he said that it is inconceivable that, and that is why he's saying that they don't have a power of rejection of an estimate. He said that it is inconceivable that a National Assembly would not pass estimates presented by the executive, because it is inconceivable that the parliament of a country will expect the country to be run without money. I believe he even said that the parliament itself can be shut down. Because assuming tomorrow they cut the budget for the parliament, or they reject the expenditure for the parliament, then that is, they would have cut their foot from which they are standing. They will cut the ground on which they are standing. Okay. So the point is that they don't have that kind of power. The Chief Justice described their function in the Committee of Supply as a watchdog function, a gatekeeping function, a gatekeeping function. They don't have a power to shut the gate. That is not a gatekeeping function. They have a power to regulate what goes in, not to shut. So one And that is the only pronouncement on this matter from the court. The other fundamental point that I want to recognize, want to make emphatically, is that, look, if we are going into a state of anarchy, then we are going. But if we want to remain a civilized nation, and if we want to remain a society where the rule of law prevails and where we don't behave like animals, then we have to respect certain institutions which the law has created to ensure that there is equilibrium in our society, peace and order in our society. The judiciary is that institution that pronounces on the law. Whether you like it or not, the judiciary has in it a procedure for you to challenge decisions which you are dissatisfied with. All right? The parliament has power to pass laws. And when they pass laws, they expect the country to obey those laws. And when there's a violation of those laws, you go to the court. Or if you are confused about the law, you go to the court. And the court interprets those laws. And the court's pronouncements are final and binding on the cane cutter, the rice farmer, the multimillionaire, and the politician.
Okay.
It is not open to any person to say that they are not accepting the court's ruling and then manufacture reasons to support such ridiculous positions. And that is what we have here in the parliament. You hear many utterances that the Chief Justice, we reject the Chief Justice ruling. It is not open to reject the court's ruling on matters of law. The court is the final arbiter of matters of law. Let me give you a graphic example of what I'm speaking about. Imagine a judge hands down a sentence to an accused person in a murder case. And that accused person says, I am rejecting your verdict. What will happen if each person in this country say that we are rejecting the court ruling? Then you know what will happen in this country? That is what anarchy is. Now when the highest forum, lawmaking forum of the land is saying that we are rejecting the law of the land, because court rulings are part of the law of Guyana. And when you have a lawmaking institution saying to the nation that we are rejecting court rulings, or we are going to disobey court rulings, or disregard court rulings, then the message you are sending to the ordinary man is that why should we, the ordinary people, bother with a judge? Why should we bother with the rule of law? Why should we bother with the parliament? Let us all do what the parliament is doing and just toss aside the law, or as I said, engage in that activity when it comes to the law.
Minister, is the ruling People's Progressive Party Civic prepared again to go up the court steps or to go to the courts if the opposition does use their majority seat next week in the parliament to reduce, reject, withhold their support for several estimates, as they would have said they would do, given the fact that they would find it necessary? And secondly, there's lots that is taking place in the National Assembly the Guyanese are not at all satisfied with. For instance, the whole business about cutting the budget. I don't know that that is a popular view that is held by a majority of our Guyanese citizens, as is being advocated by members of the opposition. And secondly, I don't know that all Guyanese are in support of the budget, as is being advocated by the government. Why is it so difficult for there to be a striking of common ground to avoid gridlocks and to avoid all of this confusion that seems to have characterized the parliament from the very onset of the opening of the 10th parliament?
The fundamental truth, Michael, is that there is no government on planet Earth that is endowed with the ability to present a budget to their country that will find the unanimous support of every single citizen. What I do know is that this budget enjoys the support of a great majority of the people of Guyana. I have cited in my speech the number of organizations which have expressed publicly their emphatic endorsement and support for Budget 2013. They include significant representative organizations in this country: the Private Sector Commission, the Georgetown Chamber of Commerce, the Amerindian People Association, the religious organizations, the labor movements, FITOG, Umbrella Union. A stakeholder session was held at the presidential office, at which over 40 of the more important representative organizations were present, representing professionals, farmers, unions, workers, private sector interests, religious groupings, and they all came out in their vociferous and emphatic support for the budget. In fact, and I have done budget outreaches, and we have spoken to people on the streets, and the press interviewed people on the streets. The press wrote editorials on this budget, press that are adverse to the government, the Kaicho News, the Stabrook News. They wrote editorials endorsing and supporting major parts of the budget. In fact, some critics of the government have described it as an election budget. You know why? Because they see a lot of good in it. Yes. It's not an ordinary budget. It's a budget that one can use at an elections, meaning there's a budget that has a lot of good for the wide cross-section of the populace. In fact, the only grouping of people that I know that are not supportive of the budget is the opposition, the 33 members in the parliament. There is no other single grouping that have expressed non-support for this budget other than the opposition. Think about it. And I want the nation to look at the last few days' newspapers and television programs. There is no organization that has said no to the budget. The only grouping of people who have said no to the budget is the opposition. I am convinced that if they are to go to their constituents on the ground, they cannot get support from their constituents to reject the budget. They can't. The other question you asked was...
Common ground, striking common ground.
Well, as I said, if we are to strike common ground, and that is always the desire, then we must do so genuinely for the benefit of the Guyanese people, and not to score political points.
On that very same note, I have in front of me a statement. Opposition, the chief financial person, the shadow finance minister, Carl Greenwich, accused the government of throwing monies for the sugar workers and for the sugar industry into a black hole. He said that all of the investments that were made in sugar, Suko, over the last years were bailouts and were monies that were being wasted on the sugar industry, which is failing basically, and on certain aspects, the Skeldon Modernization Factory. Then there was another comment made by Moses Nagamutu, who said that GPL was not worthy of receiving all of the monies that government was investing there.
Okay, so we shut down. Let us deal with Mr. Moses Nagamutu, who is always so rhetorical, never have anything of substance to say. He's saying we are wasting money in giving GPL subsidy.
Yes.
So let us shut down GPL tomorrow. Did Mr. Nagamutu say what? Tomorrow we shut down GPL. Tomorrow is Friday. We shut down GPL tomorrow. So where are we going to get electricity to run the country? Did Mr. Nagamutu say so? That is the type of infantile and reckless statements that they make. We shut the door of sugar tomorrow, close down all the sugar industry. We have essentially, and we did the calculations, nearly 100,000 people out of a population of 700,000 who cannot feed themselves the very next day. Did Mr. Greenwich say where are we going to get jobs for those people? It is easy for us in the government to say, no, okay, we are not bothering with Gaisuku. It's a problematic industry. It employs 20,000 people directly. Each of those persons employed has a family of about 4. So you have 80,000 people directly affected there. Then you have another 20,000 people who are indirectly affected by the industry, who the market vendor from whom the sugar workers would buy goods, the shop owner where they would buy their salt goods and so on. You have a whole string of people, about 20,000 of them, that get spin off from the sugar industry. So you have 100,000 people who will lose substantial income, in fact perhaps their only income, if we shut the door tomorrow. Greenwich is saying it's a black hole. So we shut it down tomorrow. Did Greenwich say, what are we going to do with 100,000 mouths to feed? No. Nagamootoo says, don't give GPL any more money. So shut down GPL tomorrow. How are we going to have air conditioning in the parliament? How are we going to have lights in the parliament? Will he come with a jog lamp? Somebody will fan him in the parliament? They enjoy all the facilities at GPL that the government is subsidizing. Yet they would make these kind of statements. And that is what I'm speaking about. Engaging in consultations must not be done as window dressing. It must be real consultations. We have a government to run. We are not engaged. We don't have time to engage in showmanship and display for political consumption. And that is what is going on here. Political dressmaking is like a fashion contest. They want to come and display that they are discussing with the government. They don't have anything sensible to say. You're telling us to shut GPL down, close down electricity in the country, and you're not telling us what you will do the next day to bring back electricity.
Are you concerned to...
No, but the other thing is, the other point I want to make, is that there's nothing wrong with bailout. The Chevrolet industry, the Chevrolet industry in America, and GM, General Motors, were bailed out by the American government, by the Obama government, by the injection of hundreds of millions of US dollars, because there were hundreds of thousands of jobs, and thousands of mortgages, and hundreds of thousands of lives that would have been destroyed if those industries were not bailed out. They were bailed out by the American government. A government of a country has a responsibility to deal with the vulnerable parts of the country. You have a family to run. It's like a parent. You have a sick child. When the child gets sick, are you going to throw it aside? Or are you going to take some savings and try to get medical care and help for that sick child so that that child can become strong again? They are telling us that if you have a sick child, you must toss it aside. Well, we are a caring government. We are in charge of this country, governing this country for the public good, for the advancement of the people of this country. And that is what we are going to do. And if they are prepared to come on board, we are prepared to accept them on board. But we are not going to entertain them if they are there just to do some political fashion show. We are not engaged. We are not interested in that kind of political exhibition.
Finally, do you believe voters have learned? Those voters that voted at the 2011 elections for the Alliance for Change, particularly sugar workers and persons in regions 5 and 6 that would have given most of their votes to that party on the basis of the promises made by that party to the sugar workers and to other PPP supporters who were obviously and for justifiable reasons, concerned about the management of the PPP, the manner in which they were dealing with issues of corruption and other things. Do you believe that given the displays from 2011 to now, that they may have learned a valuable lesson? And former President Barry Jagdeo, while he was on the campaign trail supporting President Donald Ramatar, who's now president, said that we must be very concerned about a post-electoral alliance, not necessarily to form the government, but in the National Assembly, and that came to pass.
Now, yes, there is no doubt in my mind, absolutely no form of equivocation, that there has been and there is a post-electoral alliance in the National Assembly between the APNU and the AFC. Every day we see that manifestation of it very, very patently. I hope that the people of this country, especially those who were misled the last elections, will see that alternative to the PPP is complete destruction of this country. The alternative to a PPP government is destruction. And if you only look at the parliament closely over the last year and a half, and you see the propensities, you see the tendencies, you see the behavior, you see the position taken by the opposition, there should be no doubt in the mind of an intelligent person. Mr. Nagamoto is one who quickly runs to the sugar worker and tells them that, you know, the government is neglectful of you. Tell them that, look, you can get 12 and 25% increase. He did that whole year last year. As soon as there is a strike building up or some form of conflict, he is there on the scene, agitating and aggravating the situation. In the budget, when the government puts the billions of dollars to subsidize Gaisuku, he agrees with Greenwich that Gaisuku is a black hole. So the hypocrisy is extremely evident for all to see. Well, I hope that they see, but it's a matter for them. I can only do, and the government can only do so much. We can only take the horse to the well. The horse has to drink the water. And I sincerely hope that people will see who are acting in their best interest and who are interested in the development of this country and the advancement of all the people of this country. The electricity in Linden, for example, we acceded to the demands.
No one said anything about that too.
No one, not a single word of congratulation to the government to continue to subsidize Linden and being unfair to the rest of the country because we are not subsidizing them. But when we subsidize GPL in Linden, they are paying no electricity. We are paying it for them. For the rest of the country, we are not paying the electricity for them, but we are pumping money into GPL to ensure that the rates of electricity remain affordable. So it's a form of subsidy. You didn't hear a single word of criticism or a congratulation to the government for the $2.9 billion which Lindeners and Region 10 residents will receive. Yet, you hear giving GPL a subsidy that will benefit the rest of the country. You hear it is pouring money into a black hole. Therein lies the insincerity of the opposition. So people must be conscious and intelligent when they listen to them and when they hear the call about consultation and what that consultation really means. It is a guise. It is a form of some form of political act from which they get self-induced pleasure. It's not about the development of the Guyanese people and the development of Guyana.
The budget team is overcoming challenges, I believe, and accelerating gains together, Minister. Your final words, if any, at this moment, which may be considered as part of the last hour in the lead up to the consideration of the 2013 estimates on Monday.
Well, we have to live with the unfortunate reality that we have an unreasonable opposition who have indicated quite clearly, in my view, that they are going to cut the budget, that the court said that they have no power to do so. They seem to think that they can reject that they can disobey the orders of court, they can disobey the guidance of the judiciary, they can disobey the constitution of the country, which is the supreme law, which is the law that has created them. So we have to live with that reality. That is a cross that all Guyanese apparently must bear. And we will have to see how it unfolds from there. We as the government, and we have the responsibility, being the largest political party in this country, the oldest political party, the most mature political party, which has led the Guyanese people out of every single difficulty, beginning from before independence to now. We are again will lead the Guyanese people out of this morass. We will, and we are prepared to do that. But they must understand the situation and read the ball well.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Nandlal, for joining me in Under the Microscope. And of course, we're going to be having more discussions like these yours in the upcoming days as the budget discussions and consultations and the consideration of the estimates continue. Of course, as is often said, to whom much is given, much is required. And the opposition has been put in a place of power within the National Assembly. And it is expected, of course, that they will utilize that power to the best of their ability and in the interest of all stakeholders in our country. I'm Michael Young, and this has been an edition of Under the Microscope. Thanking you very much for joining me and encouraging you to do stay tuned to TVG. Goodbye.